Good morning. This week we've been reading in our one-year Bible plan about the tabernacle and the temple that Solomon built for God's presence to dwell. And once he was finished with this project, he was so excited to dedicate it to the Lord. And the singers and musicians gathered together, lifted voices, lifted instruments, declared the goodness of God. And Solomon got on his face before the Lord, lifted his hands to heaven and cried out in prayer, sacrificed a whole lot of animals, and called out for the Lord to dwell in the place that he had built for him. And it was such an exciting time for Israel because they were able to actually feel the tangible weight and glory of God because he accepted that dedication and determined to rest upon that temple and his presence be there. And it's so interesting to read that scripture and to see the pursuit of everything that they put into achieving the presence of the Lord in a place. There was a 7-day festival, a feast, and like I said, a lot of shed blood and offerings. But God showed up. And what's really interesting is now Christ chooses to make his presence dwell inside of us. Not any longer does he just reside in a building, in a temple, in something made of hands. He resides in our hearts. And I want to read a couple of scriptures in Ephesians because this is so exciting when we recognize and we realize that the Spirit of God is within us and inside us, and that we can experience his presence on a daily basis and even hourly basis. Ephesians 3:12 says, because of Christ and our faith in him, we can now come fearlessly into God's presence, assured of his glad welcome. And if you drop down to verse 17, Paul says, I pray that Christ will be more and more at home in your hearts as you trust him. May your roots grow down deep into the soil of God's marvelous love. And so because Christ came, because Christ was that eternal sacrifice for us and for our sin, we now have access, unlimited access to God's presence. We don't have to bring an animal sacrifice now. All we have is a sacrifice of praise, and we can come into his presence with thanksgiving. We can come into his presence with praise, and we can experience who God is in his life-changing glory and weight and power on our lives all the time, whenever we want to. So I want to encourage us in our Romans scripture today. Paul talks about in Romans 8 that there is no condemnation for those who walk after the Spirit and not after the flesh. So what does it mean to walk after the Spirit instead of the flesh? It means that we are pursuing eternal, not the temporal. We are pursuing what God says versus what the world says. We are pursuing not what is carnal or lasts just in this moment, but what is going to last through eternity. And so as we pursue him and as we dedicate time with him each day and spend time in his presence, our hearts become more changed and more like his and more focused and fixed on eternity versus just on what's here today. So today I am grateful and I am thankful for the presence of God, and I am grateful for that power that comes through Christ living at home in our hearts. And so that's what I wanted to share today. And I just bless you. I bless you with great sweet time in his presence and peace as you carry out your day.